Welcome to the Global America Business Institute podcast, where we bring you conversations with experts in clean energy. My name is Brian Jeong, Director of Programs and Strategy at the GABI. Today, we have with us Hoon, a professor at the Department of Quantum and Nuclear Engineering at Korea Advanced Institute for Science and Technology, also known as KAIST. He is also the director of the Center for Advanced Reactor Research at KAIST. Professor Jeong has also played a significant role in the establishment of an educational cooperation model in Korea's nuclear exports to the UAE, and he has been a member of the transition team for the newly elected President Yoon's administration in South Korea. Professor Jeong, thank you for being with us today. Maybe if I can begin with the first question. You played a critical role in formulating the energy policy, especially nuclear energy, as a member of the transition team. Can you give us a brief overview of the energy policy of the new administration and the role of nuclear in Korea's new energy policy?
The outgoing government's energy policy is to achieve carbon neutrality net zero by having only renewable energy and without nuclear. So the nuclear power plant's construction project that was under construction was also abolished, and the continued operation, which is license renewal, and is legally permitted. However, it has been prohibited without any reason. The Walsung Unit 1, which was built like a new nuclear power plant through the grand scale, the maintenance was shut down prematurely. And this is a really absurd policy. And the new administration's policy has corrected the existing irrational energy policy with common sense. And we announced the policy to abolish the nuclear phase-out policy and achieve carbon neutrality by using both nuclear and renewable energy altogether. This is a policy that is feasible and common sense and conforms to the laws of the nature. And the nuclear energy will perform just like a backbone and energy in Korean carbon-free energy mix.
Well, that sounds definitely like good news for the nuclear industry in Korea.
Yeah, indeed.
I understand that Korea is looking to become a global green hydrogen producer, as well as many heavy industries are looking to decarbonize. So I would imagine that with the new nuclear policies, there would be significant demand increase for nuclear energy in Korea. How is the current administration looking at the expected demand for nuclear energy in Korea in the coming years? And where will these sources of new demand be expected from?
Okay, as announced, in order to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 in Korea and worldwide, in Korea, more than twice the electricity used today is required. And in addition to the electricity, the more energy carriers such as hydrogen, synthetic fuels, and the heat are required. So, therefore, to increase the proportion of nuclear power, which is currently less than 30% in electricity mix, to more than 30% by 2030, by continued operation and the new build, and to maintain at 30% plus contribution of nuclear, the nuclear must be capacity must be at least tripled compared to the current nuclear power capacity. It's quite challenging. However, we have to make it to get the carbon neutrality by 2050.
I see, I understand. That's quite a large increase in the nuclear demand. And given such a strong need for nuclear and potential nuclear build-outs, where do you think the Yoon administration will begin with addressing the energy needs and the upcoming needs for nuclear in South Korea?
Construction of Shinhanul Unit 3 and 4, which is APR 1400, will immediately begin the process of reopening. However, there was no discussion at the transition committee regarding the the promotion of the new nuclear power plant, which has now been abolished. This will be dealt with while establishing an energy master plan and the electricity supply and demand plan to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. One thing is clear. In order to achieve 2050 carbon neutrality in Korea, renewable energy alone is impossible, and nuclear power must make a major contribution, and that contribution must far exceed the current contribution in terms of capacity. Now we have 20-something nuclear reactors in Korea, and we have to increase number of nuclear reactors, maybe, for example, above 40 or something, for the carbon neutrality in a long run.
Just out of curiosity, I guess, what is the timeline that we're looking at for, I guess, these types of nuclear build-outs that might be needed? Has the Yoon administration put thought into how they're looking to, I guess, the timeline for this?
Okay, the timeline for the current administration is just 5 years. So we are looking at the reopening of the seized project, the Shinhanul Unit 3 and 4, that will be immediately in the process. However, we should have the following, the new build project. However, that has not been discussed at the transition committee. So because it depends on the energy master plan for Korea for example, for 2050. So if we fix the energy mix for the 2050, then we can have the number of the new nuclear reactors needed for the carbon neutrality. And my guess is it's quite large number of nuclear reactors, for example, new nuclear reactor in Korea.
I see. That sounds very interesting. So I also kind of wanted to touch upon potentially the export plans for the new administration. South Korea has demonstrated significant strength in exports, as demonstrated by the UAE Baraka project, which you played some part in. And I understand that President Yoon has an ambitious plan for exporting 10 nuclear power plants by 2030, with the support of a new group called the Bureau of the Nuclear Power Plant Export Strategy under the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy. Could you talk a little bit about the background of how this idea came about and maybe some of the details, including maybe the timeline and who might be involved in this?
Oh, yeah. The Bureau of Nuclear Power Plant Export Strategy will serve as a control tower for nuclear power plant exports. Exporting nuclear power plants is not just a single product, but a cooperation at the national level. While we export the nuclear power plants to the UAE, we provided cooperation packages in various fields, such as establishment of the Department of Nuclear Engineering in UAE, and the defense cooperation and industrial cooperation. Therefore, the package must be well prepared so that there is no problem for the importing country to construct and operate the nuclear power plant. And even in areas other than nuclear power, we need to find something that the two countries can cooperate with each other and include in the package. To this end, a single department of government cannot do the work. Therefore, in addition to the Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy, it will become the pan-ministerial control tower in which various ministries such as the Minister of Science and Technology, Minister of Education, the Minister of National Defense, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs participated.
I see. So for President Yoon's export strategy, I was kind of curious about the type of technologies that they're looking at. Is the focus on SMRs and advanced reactors, or is there consideration for large reactors? I was also kind of hoping to discuss the regulatory activities for SMRs and ARs. I understand that Korea is investing a lot of financial resources to develop SMRs with the hope of having a license certificate by 2028. This is quite an aggressive timeline, so I was hoping that maybe you can elaborate on this for us.
Yeah. The exports of nuclear power plants in Korea are primarily large-scale nuclear power plants. And this includes SMART, which is a small-scale nuclear reactor, and which we have already developed. And the innovative small modular reactor, innovative SMR, to be developed will enter the export portfolio after, I think, 2030. So, yes, completing the basic licensing of innovative SMR by 2028 is a very challenging goal for us. Unfortunately, we don't have much time because we have already wasted 5 years in the previous government under the nuclear phase-out policy. However, fortunately, the experience of large nuclear power plant development and smart development has not yet disappeared. So I think it is challenging, but possible. Of course, there must be a full support from the government. This includes money and the licenses. The licensing for SMR is challenging in the sense of creating new method and the criteria for judging the safety of new systems. It's not that much progress has been made, but in keeping with the development, I hope that the licensing technology development proceed one step earlier than the development of the system.
I see. Well, in addition to the financial and regulatory resources, I understand that President Yoon is also aiming to strengthen nuclear energy cooperation diplomacy with a mention of a focus on trade missions to target countries. Could you clarify the purpose of me and kind of discuss a little bit about the details of this? Is this planned to be a government-led initiative, or will this be an industry-led initiative?
Both. The first of all, we need to cooperate to successfully commercialize the pyro processing technology development that Korea and the US are jointly working on. And in the nuclear power plant construction market, Korea and the United States must cooperate. The United States has the nuclear technology, but has political and financial capabilities. Korea is competent in design, manufacturing, construction, commissioning, and project management of nuclear power plants. In a situation where Russia is virtually withdrawn from the nuclear power plant construction market, only when Korea and the US build and supply nuclear power plants that the world need will have no setback in expanding the peaceful use of global nuclear energy. That cooperation should be led by the government. There should be an industrial level cooperation between US and Korea for developing SMRs and exporting the large nuclear power plant for the world market.
I see. I'm also curious about international collaboration opportunities with Korea, and then you just mentioned about the US and Korea potential opportunities. I was wondering, do you think there are other countries that could potentially be a good partner with Korea for collaborating in exports? Maybe you can also discuss a little more on how you see US-Korea cooperation model, if there's any further activities that we can go on with.
Mm-hmm. It's actually the Korea, the import nuclear power technology from US. So I think the US is the best partner for Korea. Currently, several countries, including Poland, the Czech Republic, and Saudi Arabia, are promoting the construction of new nuclear power plants. I think Korea and the US can cooperate in the construction of nuclear power plants in these countries. UAE project seems to be a good example for us. As I understand it, the problem with the export of nuclear power plants between Korea and the US is not a kind of problem in the technology base. So we can solve the problem in the nuclear new build in the market together because we share the technology, the US and Korea.
I see. And I think on that note of U.S.-Korea cooperation, President Yoon has also mentioned that he would like to see the conclusion of the joint fuel cycle studies, which is a project that Korea and the U.S. have been collaborating on. Can you talk a little bit about the joint fuel cycle study and the current status? What do we need to reach a conclusion on this?
Although I do not know the specifics of the current situation of the project, I know that we have reached the conclusion that it is feasible in terms of technology, economic feasibility, and the nuclear non-proliferation through joint research so far. There is some experimentation and analysis left to arrive at a final conclusion, but it is within the scope of what has been done so far. So its validity is unlikely to be too much of a problem. Ultimately, the question is whether the U.S. believes in South Korea's use of pyro process technology in terms of non-proliferation. So I think in order to give some confidence, it is important, first of all, to clearly show that the Korean government policy is considering the fast reactor using pyro or disposal of the high-level waste after the pyro processing treatment. So if we can clearly mention the use of pyro processing in the national policy and the national plan, then U.S. can have some kind of confidence in terms of nuclear non-proliferation. Because technically, the pyro processing is intrinsically a proliferation-resistant technology. So I believe the bright future for the joint collaboration.
I see. Well, I think that actually transitions quite well into my next question. You mentioned the possibility of Yoon announcing the plans on the pyro processing and management. So I was hoping that you can kind of talk about what President Yoon's plans are for passing laws on spent fuel management. Can you discuss kind of the background and direction of the spent fuel management policies that the new administration is looking to enact? I guess including any sort of pyro processing.
Yeah. Basically, the Korea didn't decide whether reuse the spent nuclear fuel or dispose it directly. So, however, we do need at least the waste repository. So we have to secure that. So first of all, a legal basis is required to obtain and construct a high-level radioactive waste repository. Therefore, the first necessary step is to enact a law for the management of spent nuclear fuel. In addition to that, it is necessary to establish a government plan and set a timetable and promote it while gaining public consensus.
I see.
So yeah, in the past government administration, we just waste 5 years away reconsidering the plan and review the previous plan for the securing radioactive waste repository. So we don't have much time.
Yeah. Well, it kind of as a concluding question, I kind of wanted to, I guess, take a step back to the bigger picture and kind of ask your thoughts on, do you think South Korea, the US, and its allies will be able to meet the scale of demand for nuclear energy needed globally to affect the significant enough impact that we need for climate change efforts? And if so, what do you see as the next biggest steps moving forward?
Okay, the worldwide about more than 500 gigawatts of new nuclear power plants are needed to become carbon neutral by 2050. And in 2030s, the 30 gigawatt sum of new nuclear power plants should be built every year. And I think it will be feasible because we did it in 1980s. We built 30-something gigawatt of new nuclear power plants a year in 1980s. So clearly, the Korea or the United States alone cannot afford this scale of deployment. Now there are only a few new nuclear power plants project a year, so it could be a kind of competition. Even when competing, it is necessary to go together while maintaining cooperative relationship. Nuclear power plants built in Korea, whether in Korea or the UAE, are economical, and we do have very good track record. And many nuclear power plants are built only when they are economical. So first of all, both countries, the US and Korea, must cooperate to secure the economic feasibility of nuclear power plant. And we have to create a market, and we can divide and share the market in the future. So current market is very small. However, so we do need a large number of nuclear power plant, new fleets to achieve the carbon neutrality. And that would compass our past experience in the 1980s. So 30-something new nuclear reactor a year is very large market. So in the future, we can create the new market by building economically feasible nuclear power. And we can deliver, if we can deliver the economical nuclear power plant to the market, then the new build market will be open widely. So then we can share the market and divide the market.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I really look forward to this opportunity of these economically feasible reactors. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, Professor Jeong, and I really look forward to seeing the new nuclear policies coming out of the new Korean administration. Thank you for your time so much.
Thank you, Brian.
I hope you have a great rest of your day.